If they want something, we have to figure out a way to get it done. And that comes down to reputation, yes, but being extremely resourceful, having the network, the contacts that can provide whatever it might be that's required of you and whatever they want.
Welcome to Truly Passive Income. I'm Neil Henderson.
And I'm Clint Harris. And today a guest is Ash Atkinson. And I'm excited about this one. I met Ash. It's been, I guess, about a year ago now. We met in Asheville, North Carolina at a billionaire boardroom meeting. He and I were both speaking, and his topic was fascinating. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but we had a chance to connect over a weekend, and it's taken me this long to get him on the show, but I'm happy to have him here. So Ash grew up in rural England with an early passion for horses that led him on to Germany and then Mexico and eventually the US, where he's big in the equestrian world. So he's worked with some of the top clients in equestrian sports. Also, he's leveraged that into high-end real estate, luxury lifestyle management. He's currently residing in Wellington, Florida. He offers a range of investment options and services from equestrian services. I know he's done jet and private yacht charters in the past as well. So a lot to unpack today. Ash, thanks for being on the show. How are you, man?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here. It's I know we should have done it sooner. So,
well, that's all right. I'm excited to catch up. I know you've had a lot going on the last year, so I can't wait to unpack it. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. And I think it's safe to say we're coming up on 80 episodes on the show. We've never had anybody from the equestrian world, but you do so much more than that, and a lot of it has come from the relationships that you made in that space. So tell us a little about what your role in that world is and some of the other things that you're into.
Yeah, 100%. So I think for your audience's benefit, it probably makes sense for me just to kind of give a brief background as to kind of, who I am, what I started out with. So obviously from the intro, I'm from England originally. I grew up in a small town now north of London. And pretty, quite rural, quite industrial type town, very blue collar. But obviously a lot of farmland where I grew up. My family was in farming. And so obviously animals as well were, we had a lot of animals around growing up. And started riding horses as a kid, it was something that was done in my area. And started riding horses, really developed that into a big passion for myself. And then kind of through my teenage years, really got competitive about it, specifically show jumping. And when I left school at 18, I kind of was like the two avenues, right? It's like, do you go down the route of getting a college degree and going down and obviously that route of things that everyone knows about? Or do I, kind of take the risk, not go down that route, pursue my passion and pursue what I wanted to do, which is ultimately what I decided to do. So didn't go to college. I ended up pursuing my career in being professional in the equestrian world, which then, led me to Germany initially, as we said. So I spent 2 years working for the largest horse breeder producer on the planet, 5,000 horses a year, just a massive operation. That was really where I learned how to actually produce horses at a younger age, bring them on, learn the marketing, the buying and selling of horses. And in an operation like that, of course, it brings in people from all over the world. So it allowed me to meet people from just all different parts of the world that are in my sport and in my profession. Allowed me to actually, network with these guys. I learned how to speak German, not fluent by any means, but learned a decent amount of German. And then, kind of after a couple of years there in quite a hard environment, to say the least, I got an opportunity to go to Mexico. And so then I was down in Monterrey, which is like about 2 hours south of the Texas border. And I spent almost 2 years there. I was then with another ranch, if you want to call it, down there, guy that owns it, billionaire guy that's legitimate billionaire, should I say. And so I spent a couple of years there. Same thing, producing horses, learning the business, and then ended up in 2015 in the US. And that's really where things started to shift a lot for me, because when I moved to the States, I realized that especially the equestrian world in the United States is very amateur centric, by which I mean it's typically a sport for the ultra high net worth elite, not even the 1%, or it's a 0.01% of the population. And whereas like in Europe, for example, it's more, I guess, I don't want to say inclusive, for lack of a better word, where you can just show up and compete a horse that costs maybe a couple of $1,000 and then go to a field and then compete. Whereas in the US, it's very, big facilities, big training programs, very expensive to actually go and compete horses, to buy horses. And so for me, I really saw an opportunity whereby I could actually go to back to Europe, find horses that would fit the American sort of amateur type model, by which I mean typically very easy to ride, very easy to train, horses that these, ultra high net worth like individuals, these specifically like younger females or would be actually compete and show those horses very quickly. And so what I started to do was bring investors together. I would buy those horses in Europe when we like through a syndication typically structure, bring them to the United States, have them for a while, and then, or hopefully not very long, sell them on, and obviously would make a profit and just continue that cycle. And so, from doing that a lot, build up this obviously pretty expensive network of ultra net worth individuals, from those that invested in us, but also actually those I was selling horses onto. So, go down the Forbes list, pretty hefty amount of those individuals I've networked with or are clients of ours. And then, so I was in California for a couple of years. And then 2017, I moved to Wellington, Florida, which is about an hour north of Miami, but about 30 minutes in from West Palm Beach. And that's really, I would class as I guess everyone classes like the capital of equestrian, especially in the United States, if anything, probably the world. And this is really where between sort of December and May is really where everyone that's involved in the equestrian world of a very high elite status typically comes for the winter time. Obviously, as you know, Florida is generally speaking snowbirds. And so this is like for equestrians, this is like within that is the heart of that. And that's kind of really how, it's progressed from there. And I'll obviously hand it back to you guys and we can go forward.
Well, we've had somebody who's syndicated beef before, ATMs. We have yet to have anyone who has syndicated horses before. So I'm curious, just for my own education, what does that involve? I mean, what's a high level horse cost from Europe and getting it over to the United States? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, obviously the numbers are very broad. From a travel cost, if we just look at the actual logistics costs, it's definitely increased over the past like 3 or 4 years. Obviously, with gas prices going up, so obviously cost of flight. So first of all, we always fly them to the United States. They don't go on a boat or anything like that. They come in a plane. There's a few airlines like FedEx, Emirates, these guys that do a lot of that, and there's a couple other like KLM based out of Holland that do this. And there's a mix. Some planes are actually fully cargo planes. Others are actually half commercial, half cargo. And the horses actually travel in a big cargo container where you can fit 2 or possibly 3 horses per that container. Just lifts up, goes straight in the plane, and that's how they ship. So without trying to go too complicated into the nitty gritty, so obviously you have male horses, female horses. So male horses that haven't been cut or castrated, those are stallions. Those are the most expensive to ship to the US because when they get here, there's a big 30-day quarantine period when they get to the United States. So that can be anywhere from $20,000, $25,000 per horse, down to then geldings, which are like castrated male horses, which can be around sort of 8,000 to 10,000, and then on the mares, which are the female horses, can be around 15,000, 12 to 15,000. Again, because there's a quarantine process on the back end. So that's like the cost from a transport side. There's only 3 airports in the United States that actually can 3 or 4, I forget off the top of my head. No, 4, sorry. That it can actually, horses can land in, which is in New York, Chicago, Miami, and LAX. So that's like the logistics side of things. In terms of the acquisition cost, I mean, it's almost, the way I look at it is like real estate. I mean, you can buy horses from anywhere from 5,000-10,000 up to millions of dollars. And I've been involved in transactions where horses have cost upwards of $5 million. So there is a big variation for sure in that side.
I'd just like to point out that 2 hours ago, I was getting made fun of for too often in our podcast episodes using the phrase about betting on the jockey and not the horse. I'd just like to say that I was ahead of my time. It was wildly apropos. And we talk about picking LP investments and things like that, and that looking at the deal versus looking at the operator on the deal. And this is literally a situation where, yes, you're investing in the horse, right? You're investing in the value delta between what this horse is worth in Europe or wherever it came from and what it's going to be worth to a different buyer pool with different training and basically the pedigree that it comes from not just on the animal, but on the person representing it. And this is literally a situation where you better be betting on the breeder or the trainer or the jockey, whatever it may be, versus the actual deal itself, right? So first of all, I'd like to rub your nose in that. So secondly, this is one of those things. Can you imagine like the insurance costs and something like this? Like this is a living, breathing animal that has a fairly short shelf life, I would expect, in terms of what the career for a jumping horse looks like. So I know that you also, for a long time, and I'd like just throw a few quick numbers at us. You've turned over a lot of exotic cars as well. And I know that you also have done yacht and jet charters and things like that. Is this a situation where your career in equestrian just opens you up to this new world, and then you're looking at these consumers and what they're into, and you're just like, oh, I can provide that. I can do this. I know how to source this. I know how to create this. I can see what this is worth over here. I'll go do the work of bringing it here because I know where the buyer pool is. Is that how that evolved kind of naturally, just understanding the people that you're running in the circles with?
Yeah, 100%. I think the main thing to point out is that, at that level of elite, obviously, as we said, it's the 0.01% of the population. That is a very small group of people. And within that, there's a very small group of people that those individuals would trust with really anything in their lives. So it's very common that, for example, if someone is flying in to try horses from us, buy horses, or they're clients of ours, because we also train clients too. So they come and, they stable with us. We train the horses. We train them to ride. Likelihood is they're in a variety of other high asset services. So as you said, private jets, exotic cars, luxury real estate, like, they're all typically in that same realm. And it's very common for me to, meet someone that, like, if, for example, I was, doing a lot of exotic car work, as you mentioned, I'd be doing a deal there, find out that they are friends with someone that I know that I'm doing a deal with on the horse side. Purely, like, randomly. They could be in different parts of the United States, but it's very common, as you said, that high net worth world is very, very exclusive, obviously very elite. And so to your point with that, yes, I noticed that taking the network that I had, and then on top of that, people that actually trust me because they know I've delivered, for example, in the horse world, that they know that likelihood is I can provide, or they at least know I'm a trusted resource in other asset classes. So yeah, for example, when I was doing a lot of buying, selling exotic cars, those clients would know, okay, well, they could go to a dealership or a mainstream dealership, maybe not have the service, or maybe have other issues. As we know, especially in the car world, a lot of things can be very sketchy and not quite legitimate. So they know if it comes through me, a high degree of certainty that vehicle is what I say it is when it comes through. Or same with the private jets. If I'm providing private jet service, it's going to be a high quality, brokerage firm I'm working with that understands the client. It's going to provide the best service. It's not just some, random out there to set up shop last week and it's just kind of, sort of white labeling jet services, or for lack of a better term.
So before we move on to some other questions that I have, throw some quick numbers at us. In terms of exotic cars, what's the most expensive car that you flipped, and like how many and what different types of cars are you typically working with in the past?
Yeah, so I've been fortunate enough to really work most ends of the spectrum on that side of things. So lower ends, $30,000, $40,000 cars up to probably the most expensive we did was the Bugatti Chiron. That was about 3.5 million at the time, which those actually haven't really changed that much in terms of the value. They've been about the same. But like, I would say that I negotiated and did everything on was the new Ford GT, which was, this is like 2 years ago now. It was about, the guy wanted like 1.1 million. I negotiated down to like, I think it was around 920,000. So we and we knew the car was valued around $1 million to one a bit. So like we had a decent spread, right out the gate. The guy obviously, the guy had two of these and just needed to sell one. And this one actually had the highest mileage of any of the Ford GT on the market. So of course that gave us a negotiating standpoint to work with, and we were willing to hold that car. So there's obviously, not to go towards tangent, but like for example, with that particular car, that wasn't bought to be a car that we were going to flip tomorrow. That was a car we had to wait for the market in terms of other cars to catch up to the mileage of ours to make it worth, because we knew that car wasn't going to depreciate because there was very few of those GTs made. So we had to basically wait. For example, I'll give you the numbers. That car had about 6,000 miles on it. At the time, this was in 2022 or 21. No, 22, sorry. And those models of car were like 2019, 2020. And typically in that time, most of those cars had less than 2,000 miles on them. So of course, we're buying a $6,000 mile car. There was a time obviously where those cars have to catch up to ours, and there was limited units, so we knew we weren't going to depreciate. So that was a longer term play as a car.
Wow, that's amazing. I never thought about it like that. So let me ask you this, especially importing, exporting horses, cars, whatever it may be. And again, you're talking about the 0.01% of the population. That, to me, that means that those people don't really have borders. Like, these are world travelers. They're all over the place. In my opinion, the most valuable thing that you have by far is reputation among that group, because obviously a very elite group that knows each other, but also it's international experience and your ability to navigate going from one country to the other. These are globetrotting people that have property all over, and you're basically a logistics guy, right? Like, you're handling, you're so much more than that, right? It's a relationship and it's a trust thing, which is the most important thing. But your job is to navigate the strategic logistics of moving things around to where the buyers are and recognizing value in one place and bringing it someplace else. So you're handling a lot of different assets and just detail-oriented logistics, sometimes with very valuable items like a car, sometimes with living items that are also very valuable like a horse. So a lot of fine attention to detail. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Very fine attention to detail. And above all else, at that level, it's typically speaking kind of older money, I would say generational money. They to an extent, there is an understanding the value of a dollar. Let's put it that way. So there's, you see a lot of this new money now where they're just throwing money around like crazy, not understanding the value of anything's worth. And obviously that we know what that leads to, right? But I would say a lot of the clients I work with, they're older generational money. They understand you, but also they want a good deal. But at the same time, generally speaking, money is no object. So if they want something, we have to figure out a way to get it done. And that comes down to reputation, yes, but being extremely resourceful, having the network, the contacts to know you can provide whatever it might be that's required of you and whatever they want, right? So there is obviously a fine line between the two, between obviously the value of something and of course getting it on the timeline that they ideally would like.
I love that. Let me ask you this. So you talked about kind of timing the market specifically with that one vehicle and waiting for the other cars to catch up. But also a lot of what you're dealing with is going to be very cyclical. Like, the market's tough right now. We're facing a lot of economic headwinds. So in terms of value going up or down or stabilizing, it makes sense to me to do different things at different times, depending on what the market is telling you to do, especially in your ability to listen to the market and the consumer. So tell me, I met you in the capacity of being on the board with the Pearson Equity Group and working with a fund. So tell me what you're working on now, what you're excited about now. And, I know that you're still taking a lot of time in the equestrian world. I understand you're not doing cars as much these days. So outside of what you're doing with the equestrian world, which sounds like it's fairly seasonal, tell me what else you're working on and what you're excited about.
Yeah. So I've been with Dan Pearson literally since the start. He asked me to join. We actually connected through another group. This was about 4 or so years ago now. And I was doing quite a bit in real estate. And I think he had a property potentially that I think it was like a hotel or something that he was working with the seller on, and I had a potential buyer for it. And so that's kind of how we originally connected. And it's funny, he'll tell you the story, but literally on the first phone call we had, he was like, "Hey, also I'm starting this fund. Do you want to be on the board for it?" Just literally in the first conversation we had.
Sounds like Dan.
Yeah, that's Dan Pearson. Yeah. He's been on the show before. Yeah, he's a young, hungry guy.
No, I know he was been on with you guys. So so he asked me to join, and here we are 4 years later, and I'm more active now. I'd say I've kind of moved up into more of a like managing partner position alongside him. More from more the fact that I've been around longer than everybody else. More of the reason, but yeah. So with Dan, obviously right now we're on Fund 2. We had great success with Fund 1. Fund two, we're very excited to working with you guys with Nomad Capital. We like I said, obviously we met you guys quite a while back now, and really, your business model. I've had some experience in the self storage sector. I real estate license in Florida, and I used to have it under a brokerage that was also the largest acquirer of self storage in the United States. So I learned a lot about that business model. I love the self storage sector, and then obviously to see what you guys are doing and how you've actually not just taken that asset class, but brought in a whole new perspective on that asset class and just lowered your entire cost base is really phenomenal. So yeah, right now we're very excited to be looking to raise on fund two to be actually deploy some capital into you guys.
Thank you, sir. Checks in the mail. Appreciate that plug.
Yeah.
But seriously though, I honestly think there is something to dig into here from an educational standpoint for the listener, right? And this whole thing is obviously an educational platform that we're obviously trying to learn ourselves, but we want to share value as well. So you guys are operating with a fund of funds strategy where you are putting together a group of capital from investors. Say, let's make up a number of $10 million. And you're taking $10 million and you guys are taking on the responsibility of finding not just operators, but also deals that you like. And say it's going to be 30% self-storage, 30% car wash, 30% multifamily, 10% exotic, whatever. I'm making up these numbers, by the way. But whatever it may be, investors are putting their money into that fund, and that fund is being deployed in a way that for them, it's a single investment, but it's the equivalent of an alternative investment strategies mutual fund that you guys are basically, you're vetting the sponsors and things like that. But talk a little bit about, with the fund of funds model, what's one of the benefits or some of the benefits to a limited partner investor by investing with you guys, that a benefit that they get just besides the fact that you guys are doing deeper due diligence than they would likely do on their own, right? What's the benefit that comes with I'm putting $100,000 or $500,000 with Pearson Equity Group versus investing it myself, maybe even with those same operators? What are some of the benefits that come along with that?
Yeah, I think going back to kind of what you said there on the due diligence side, I mean, obviously for us, we have our networks, Dan, myself, and our other partners have our networks of investors that want to work with us that we've known for a long time. But I think, based upon my experience in life too, that, when I've referred deals to people that, or should I say, when I've connected a deal with a potential investor, once that's done, there's an element of, well, I have no real control in what happens. So if there was something just to go south, regardless of what I've done to make sure it doesn't, there's, something could happen there. And then I potentially spoil the relationship with that investor, or, there's an element of them not really, it's not a lack of trust, but there's an element of them just being more cautious about maybe going into an investment where I'm necessarily not involved per se. So I would say to start with, yes, the due diligence side, of course, we are vetting the deals much more rigorously than maybe they themselves have the time to do. For example, if an investor just looked to you guys directly or looked at, an investment directly without us being the intermediary, obviously they've got to spend their time, their energy, potentially actually looking at that investment, understanding, okay, are these guys really the guys I want to work with, or is somebody else? Whereas, myself, Dan, and our partners, we're taking the time to look at this spectrum of opportunities and really going deep dive into, the operators, those fund returns, the thesis and basically everything from a risk mitigation standpoint. So I would say that's a big part for us. But then, from our side of things too, it's we are coming in, for example, with you guys, as a real analogy, we're coming into you guys with a bigger piece of the pie, right? We're coming on a bigger capital injection, which of course allows us to then be able to negotiate with you guys a bit on some of the, the returns, et cetera. So it allows actually our investors to potentially get a better return than necessarily coming with a smaller piece or smaller chunk of the pie directly to you guys. And I think that's something as well that's been very keenly received by investors we're talking to on the fundraise right now.
Yeah. Again, the idea is that a group of investors pooling their money together into a larger amount can negotiate better terms or hit a higher threshold to get a better pref, whatever it may be. And I'm certainly not encouraging you to come negotiate with us on that. But
yeah.
the reality is,
thank you for that clarification, Clint.
The reality is there's value there, right? And I'm saying this for the benefit of the listener here, is that there's value of like, yes, if you're going to come to an operator, for example, with Nomad, if you're going to come with, say, $100,000, it's going to have a 6% pref, and it's going to be like a 19% IRR or so. If you're coming with anything over 250, it's an 8% pref, and it's closer to a 22% IRR. And there's $1 million share as well, right? So that there is value there, because from the operator standpoint, it makes sense for us to have less investors on a deal with higher amounts of money, because it makes the communication easier and the legal easier as well. And there's value there. And the operators typically are inclined to give that up for the higher share classes. So it's, again, a situation where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And a group of investors can pool capital together and deploy it together, making sure they're hitting the rules in terms of accredited investors and everything else that comes along with that, right? So there's obligation from a moral standpoint and ethical standpoint. But beyond that, the idea is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And for the people doing the work of putting that together as a fund, there's certainly value there together that can be enjoyed all around. So, alternative investments have really only been around for the masses since about 2012. So this is still a fairly young asset class that a lot of people don't know about. And it fascinates me constantly, not just how many different types of deals there are, RV parks or tiny homes or hotels or apartments or car washes or whatever it may be, but there's basically an unlimited amount of deal structure and fund of funds and co-GPs and everything else. And that's why I think the education side of things is so important. So Ash, let me ask you this. I would classify you as a man who understands value, and you've got an eye for recognizing a good deal, right? Whether that's in a horse or a car or something else, like you've got an eye for recognizing that. So tell me, in the current economic environment and where we are in the life cycle of our generation, the older generation, the younger generation, what are you excited about right now? What are you keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I think we're in a very interesting market right now. I would say, because of the fact I have so much exposure in a variety of different high net worth arenas primarily, I think it gives me a better gauge of actually, because what I've seen is, especially in the exotic car world now, exotic car prices have come drastically down. They've come down back to the depreciation curve that they were on like pre-COVID. That's for sure. Now that inventory has come back, cars are flooding the market. Okay, obviously other factors are at play, right? Interest rates, etc. Cost of capital. So therefore, there's more exotic cars in the market. Crypto obviously taking a hit too. We saw a huge increase in specifically Lamborghini Huracans and G63 and Mercedes G63s right when Bitcoin tanked back, and it was like middle of 2020, I think it was. So there's a lot of interesting factors there that definitely came into play. I would say for me, what I'm excited about is, we are going through a big generational shift right now. Of course, baby boomers are retiring. We're seeing a huge transfer of wealth shift happening basically from now for the next, to about 2035-ish region. And for me, I am very keen on getting more invested into private equity world, into buying smaller businesses, especially businesses that are, heavy, like sort of blue collar type businesses that aren't going to be disrupted by AI, that aren't going to be disrupted by a lot of those newer technology pieces, but are ready to be upgrades to be brought to that technology. For example, stuff like we're looking heavily at home service businesses, everything from, HVAC, roofing, electrical contracting, even like screen-in porch services, companies that are going to be around for at least the next generation, theoretically speaking, that aren't going to be disrupted. And I think there's a lot of these companies now that are, as baby boomers are retiring, their kids are not interested in inheriting those businesses. They're too busy, becoming Instagram influencers and things of that nature. That there's a lot of value there, as we talked about, that is ready to be captured. And I think if for savvy investors to come in at a relatively low interest, it's from a cost standpoint, can come in and acquire these types of businesses with infinite upside potential. That for me is what I'm very excited about. And that's really where my focus has shifted a lot into the past sort of year or so. And that's where I'm going to be pushing a lot going forward.
And what's what's your play there? Are you rolling up these mom and pop businesses, professionalizing them, increasing the EBITDA, and trying to package them all up to a private equity group and selling them? Is that the basic play?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, so our branding is called Keep Acquisitions, because the goal being one to keep the legacy of the companies we're actually acquiring. Because talking to a lot of sellers we speak to, and a lot of baby boomers, they've worked in this business 30, 40 years. Probably they spent more time in this business than they have in their marriages with their families, right? So legacy is a big important factor, and it's really what I value tremendously for myself, and of course for businesses I work with, investors I work with, et cetera. So for us, the goal is, to acquire businesses within the same sector that we can, professionalize, we can streamline the services. So for example, rather than each of these companies having their own accounting, own marketing, own sales, we would have them basically one, umbrella effectively that operates, where we have each of those different sectors that basically, or the different, parts of that company will basically provide their services to each of those companies as we kind of bring them together and, kind of really see what that looks like. Potentially that rolls up into a bigger private equity play. Really my goal is to acquire these businesses and actually keep them within a portfolio and to continue to grow and to build them up and just keep adding on and kind of moving it forward. That's really what I'm more passionate about necessarily than just like bringing it together and just selling it and kind of be done. So.
Well, with everything that you've done in the past, I have no doubt that you'll have success, and taking a lot of different types of businesses and rolling it together, honestly, just seems like the next natural step with everything you've done so far. So that's great. Listen, Ash, thank you so much for taking time with us today. I want to tell you how much I appreciate you coming on. You have a very unique perspective. A lot of it came through a lot of hard work and natural talent that you grew upon. So you got relationships all over the world with a very elite network, and that's come with some really unique life experiences. And it's fun to see you using those relationships and experiences to further yourself and do good things for the people around you at the same time. So, Ash Atkinson, thank you for coming on board. If anyone wants to connect with you, find out more about you, or invite you on for an interview on their show, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Probably either Instagram, just Ash Atkinson, then the number 1, or LinkedIn. Just look up Ash Atkinson. You can find me pretty easy there. Probably the easiest 2 ways I would say to connect with me.
Sounds great. Well, Ash, thank you again, man. We really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, man.
Thank you so much for listening and watching the Truly Passive Income podcast. If you liked the show, if you think it would be useful for someone else, the greatest compliment that you could give us would be to share the episode, leave a comment down below, or leave us an honest review. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to let us know down below. And remember, with truly passive income comes freedom of time, place, and the freedom to pursue your higher purpose.